Okay, so the next thing that we're going to talk about is the BC coast. The BC coast is full of really great and wonderful things. And we have someone from the Hakai Institute to explain a little bit of what he's seen over his time up on the Central Coast. Everyone welcome Josh Silberg. Thanks for coming on our show.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So Josh, you're a scientist and you're a science communicator, and you've also seen a lot of really amazing things while you've been researching up on the Central Coastline. I just want you to share with the audience what some of the things that you've seen over your time up there.
Yeah, so like a weird number of your guests, I'm also from Alberta. So I grew up in Calgary. My first time coming out to the coast, I remember visiting my uncle on Vancouver Island and going to Miracle Beach and really falling in love with the ocean and wanting to come out here to go to UVic for my undergrad and Simon Fraser for my master's. And had an opportunity to go work on the central coast of BC. So if you go from the northern tip of Vancouver Island and go about 100 kilometers north of that, you hit Calvert Island. It's also about an hour boat ride south of Bella Bella, if you know where that is. And the only thing on this island was an old fishing lodge, which was converted into a research station. The whole area around it is all conservancy land, provincial, co-managed with the local Heiltsuk and Wekino nations that live there. And it really, the first time I was there in 2013, so I've been up there now for 4 years, and it's really changed how I see the coast, and there's been a couple of really interesting finds there. So the Hakai Institute, where I work now, there are scientists that work from the ice fields down to the ocean floor, pretty much every coastal system, going from archaeology to ecology, geology. And there's been some really interesting archaeological finds in the past few years that have sort of really changed the way that we fundamentally think about the BC coast. So one was a set of 13,000-year-old footprints, which they found at the bottom of a test pit right near the research station. And those, I think, are really powerful because you imagine, we all know what a footprint looks like in the sand. And to think about somebody, it was actually, they found at least 3 sets. And pretty much as far as they could go, there were definitely more of them. And so to think about people walking around, it was next to a hearth feature, which is the bottom of a fireplace. So they were having a fire. And I think that is very powerful. And then this past year, on an island a few dozens of kilometers north of Calvert Island called Trickett Island, they found a site that they dated back to 14,000 years old. So to put that into perspective and why this is so powerful, what the media picked up on was that it's even older than the pyramids. The pyramids are about 5,000 years old. Machu Picchu is about 600 years old. The Parthenon's about 2,500 years old. This is way older than the pyramids. You know, one said it's even older than Rome. Like, Rome is not that old. So to put this into perspective, there were giant ground sloths in North America at that time. And what this is changing is people used to think that people moved across the Bering Land Bridge and in a sort of ice-free corridor inland. But what really is sort of coming out of this work and work along the coast is that people moved down the coast. And it makes a lot of sense. So basically, glaciers covered most of North America, but there were these refugia along the coast. And they used boats, and they have, technologies and ways of going across the landscape. When you work up there, the other thing that becomes very apparent is there's no such thing as pristine wilderness. Not one area when you walk around there is untouched. There are culturally modified trees, there are midden sites, which is where people that eat shellfish, they toss them into these big, it's basically a refuse pile, so you can see what they were eating and their sort of cultural habits. When the archaeologists walk around, they find lithics, like rock tools, pieces of mountain goat horn on the coast. The mountain goats don't live there, so they were trading inland, and obsidian, which is volcanic glass, that they can actually tell where it came from, up to 200 kilometers away inland BC, and some sites as far south as Oregon. So it really makes you think about Canada 150 plus. When you said Canada 150 plus, the first thing I thought about was 150 plus the other way. It was, I guess, which is minus, going back, 14,000 years. It's a really long time, and across that landscape, there are maps of where settlements were, where they found midden sites, and the whole coast is covered. So the populations before European diseases wiped out huge portions of that were really significant, and the coast looked a lot different than it does today.
Yeah, and it's a crazy story that's consistently emerging and developing, and it's always interesting to think about the things you've learned or you understand, and how some discoveries can flip that completely on its head. The other thing I wanted to talk to you, Josh, is I know that you're a science communicator. You tell really good stories, and you know how to talk to people about science. And I want to know, how you kind of came into that, why you decided to kind of move into, telling your story and talking about science in an accessible way.
Yeah, so there's a growing movement among scientists and academia in general. Maybe I'm hopeful, but that to move beyond the ivory tower. We spend a lot of money, including a lot of public money, on this research, and to put it in paywalled journals in language that most people don't understand isn't really the best way to share knowledge. So sometimes I think of myself like a translation service. I get to work with the scientists of varying disciplines at the Hakai Institute and help them share their stories in various ways. So that could be blogs, social media, video. There's sort of a place for everything, media releases. And a lot of that is just using different language. Metaphor is very powerful, and often the biggest thing that I challenge myself to do is make sure that the metaphor is right. Because you can have mixed metaphors and you can have wrong metaphors, and that gives the total wrong idea. So you always want to get it accurate. But, you're trying to put people in the shoes of those people. They can experience it themselves. They can see why we do what we do. That's another important thing. Oftentimes, you'll see a talk, and they'll talk for 10 minutes about what and how they did it. And really, what people are interested in is why you did it. So a lot of the difference between science communicating and academic writing is just moving things around. So academics like to write introduction, methods, results, discussion, conclusion. And journalists and bloggers, it's called burying the lead. Basically, you're putting your best part last, and no one's gonna read to the end if you put your really juicy bits at the end. So you flip it. And there's a lot of different techniques, storytelling. These are all skills, so it's really nice to see a lot of your top 25 doing dance and doing all sorts of other things. What I get to use in my job is photography and social media and computer skills and field skills and interview skills and all sorts of things that you learn along the way on top of the scientific background. But really, when it comes down to it, don't underestimate the value of your extracurriculars and what that might mean and where those connections might lead. At a potlatch in Bella Bella, I heard Jewish folk music being played during dinner as part of a cultural exchange, which was very sort of odd for me to hear Yiddish that I understood from my youth at a potlatch in Bella Bella. But these are the sorts of connections that you wouldn't necessarily think you could make, but are very important.
Yeah, totally. And Josh, you got a room full of wonderful top 25 finalists here. For those of them who are sometimes they're doing science, sometimes they're working on policies or want things to change, regardless of what they're doing, they want to talk to their peers and they want to communicate with them well. For folks who feel like they're budding as a science communicator or just someone as a communicator in general, where do you think they should start?
Well, the number one thing is think about your audience. So we predominantly use Twitter and Facebook and a little bit of Instagram. For a lot of youth, it's Snapchat. Snapchat isn't part of our audience. You can't do everything. So think about what the different platforms are good for. So Twitter is really good for interacting with other scientists around the world. There's also a lot of terrible things on Twitter. So Facebook is great for interacting with people that you know. Instagram is great for sharing visual stories, but it's not necessarily great ways to drive traffic to a website because you can't put a link in. So there are advantages and disadvantages to basically all of these different avenues of reaching people. And so just think strategically about how you use your time, experiment. Sometimes you might try something and go, you know what, this isn't working. But really think about what your goals are and what your audience is throughout the process, and iteratively make decisions that way. And if I personally really like Twitter because I get to interact, I get to follow conferences I'm not at, I get to interact with people I don't know. For other people, they don't want to be on that, and that's totally fine. And so don't feel like you have to be on any sort of social media if you don't want to. There are different ways. Do what you feel comfortable with, and think about who you want to reach and how you might best do that. That's
amazing. And Josh, if they want to find out more about the Hakai Institute, where can they go?
So you can go to hakai.org is the Institute's website, and we're at Hakai Institute on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. There's also Hakai Magazine, which is funded by the same group but editorially independent, and they do coastal stories from around the world that sort of the intersection of culture and society. So they're hakaimagazine.com, and I recommend. There's short form, long form articles and videos and things like that. So Hakai Institute for Science on the Coast, and Hakai Magazine for coastal stories around the world.
Amazing, wonderful. Everyone give a hand for Josh.